Hi, welcome to our glazing of the Kusama Pumpkin. Here's my blueprint that I'm going to use as a reference. So I've set up my glaze on a wax paper palette. If you're remote, you can use nail polish at home or acrylic paints. I like to have a variety of paintbrushes because some areas will be detailed where I need to get around some details with the tip of a small brush. Other areas will be large, like the background behind my eyeball designs. So I have two different brushes that I'm using for my glazing or painting process. Again, my students who are remote, for your air dry or oven baked clay, you can use either acrylic paints or nail polish. And when you are mixing colors, if you're mixing, you can see my wax paper palette here. You always want to mix dark into light. So when I wanted to make a very, very light green, I had yellow on my palette and I just did a little tip of the paintbrush of green and blended it into the yellow. So now I'm using my detail brush to go around some of my patterns and designs. In this case, it's the eyeball section of my Kusama Pumpkin. My pattern is eyeballs, polka dots, eyeballs, polka dots. So you should watch the video first about Kusama and understand what she does to decorate her sculptures and paintings, and then make a work of your own artwork, but in the style of Kusama. So when I have carved in or concave parts in my sculpture, concave means falling in, convex would mean popped out. I always do those details first. So I get my detail brush and I'm wiggling into the concave details in my polka dot pattern of my Kusama Pumpkin. It's easier to do those first and then do your background, the large areas. So I'm deciding on my brush. I'm going to start with my larger brush filling in. Here in the studio, when we use glaze, it has to be really thick. So you're doing 2 to 3 coats with glaze in the studio if you're hybrid, and that will make the glaze pigment, the color that you're using, richer and shinier. You really don't want any dry, thin areas. The glaze will not look good when it's fired in the kiln. So I started with I'm using 2 different tones of pink. And so I'm filling in, and then I'll overlap, just like you can see in the green area where my eyes are. I have a dark green on the outside of that section and a light green in the middle. It'll add interest to the final product, which you'll see at the end of this video that's been glazed. Outlining neatly and then filling in. So whenever you're painting, you want to outline around your details and then fill in your background. Take your time. You want to really try hard not to leave any white areas of the clay. If you are using white in your composition, you want to paint it or glaze it white, but we would never leave raw clay, unfinished clay. Working around my details and filling in with the tip of my brush. Switching to my detail brush to get some finer areas that I wasn't able to use my larger brush on, and then spreading some of the glaze for a more even coating. Now remember, Kusama's fascination with pumpkins has nothing to do with Halloween. In fact, these will not be done anywhere near Halloween. She has a fascination with that organic, gourd, pumpkin-like shape, and she repeats that theme throughout her sculptures and her paintings. Going back over with my detail brush, adding a second coat, filling in and smoothing out. I'm using a complementary color scheme. So I've chose variations of green with variations of red. So pink would be in the red family. And I'm making sure that my coats are nice and thick and detailed. You really don't want to rush through your project because you want the end result to look really good. It's easier to hold your sculpture in your helping hand rather than to leave it on the table, because that way I can twist it and turn it and check all my areas and I don't forget anything because I'm able to manipulate it. Don't worry if you get a little paint on your hand, you can always wash it off. Now I'm doing my concave details, the pupils that are in the middle of my eyes. I'm checking my work to see what else I need to do. And I always save my detail color black for last. So I'm going in with my detail brush. And in my illustration, my blueprint of my Kusama Pumpkin, I did have black outlines. So I'm going in with my glaze and I'm going ahead and outlining my outlines in black with my detail brush. I think it just makes the end composition, the end appearance of the sculpture, just really stimulating to have that contrast of black against color. I did purchase some taxidermy eyes. They're glass eyes that artists use to put in taxidermy sculptures, or sometimes people even use glass eyes in, like a stuffed bear, like a teddy bear, or if you have like a little stuffed rabbit or something like that. So I knew ahead of time that my eye designs didn't have to be completely modeled very well because I'm going to add another medium, my taxidermy eyes. I'm using a toothpick in this case to get that nice black polka dot detail that I have in my sketch. And it just really, wait till you see the end result. You'll see how it turns out. And my paintbrush was actually too big to do the stem black lines. So I'll go back into my stem lines with the toothpick as well. So you can use a toothpick, the tail end of a paintbrush, or the tip of a bamboo skewer, a pin, anything that, if you have a lot of little tiny details, you're gonna wanna go ahead and use something, the right tool to get in there. Like I wouldn't use a large paintbrush to try to do details. It just would not work out. I wouldn't use a screwdriver to try to cut down a tree. I'd use an axe. So here you can see I'm adding those outline details with the toothpick. I do have to go over it a couple of times. The toothpick doesn't absorb the glaze as well as a paintbrush, so I'm constantly dipping and adding in a nice thick coat of glaze. Touching up some things that I forgot, like I'm always investigating my sculpture to see what's happening, to make sure it looks good. Finishing some of those lines with my toothpick and trying to get in there. With glaze, unlike nail polish or acrylic paint, the glaze absorbs into the porous clay body, so it dries fairly quickly and I'm able to handle my Kusama pumpkin. If you're using paint, you might have to stop in between the stages. So here's my blueprint compared to what I just finished. And here is my finished Kusama pumpkin after it's been fired in the kiln. The glass eyeballs have to be hot glued on after it's fired.